SpaceX Endeavour on the big loop, BC, we're holding.
SpaceX copies and confirms we are holding at the 60-meter hold point. We are awaiting ground go to begin the access maneuver. We'll come back on board when ready.
Endeavour copies.
As Gary mentioned, this Crew-2 capsule will remain at this port until it returns to Earth in a couple of months. But before it does that, it'll get a visit from the new Crew-3 crew, as they will be using the IDA-2 port where this Dragon capsule just left. And similarly to how we had a full house with two Crew Dragons on station at once, both Crew-1 and Crew-2, we will have a similar...
On the big loop, ground will be commanding relocate transfer to begin the access transition. As a reminder, the soft capture ring deploy will begin in relocate to access.
Endeavour copies, and we're ready.
And Station Houston on the big loop, monitor per block Delta, step 3, and 1.602 Dragon departure monitoring.
Copy and work.
Once again, you're getting a live view from the flight control rooms in Mission Control Hawthorne. Teams there working with teams here in Mission Control Houston, monitoring today's operation. We had a good commanded hold at 60 meters in front of the new docking access, and teams initiated the relocation maneuver. Now we are on our way, the Crew Dragon itself, from the original docking access to the new docking access in front of the Zenith port. Teams here in Mission Control Houston have confirmed that that motion from the original docking access to the new one is looking good. The Crew Dragon on the expected trajectory to arrive at its new docking access. In the meantime, the International Space Station itself has been configured for its docking attitude, making sure that when Crew Dragon arrives on the new docking access, the station will be in the predicted position. Everything's looking good as we transition from one docking access to the other. Now, you may have noticed we've been showing a lot of views, live views, from the various control rooms and the flight control teams that are supporting today's maneuver from the ground. And it's expected that we'll have a gap in some live video from the International Space Station during the port relocation. Now, this is all due to the equipment locations and orbital mechanics of some of the communication equipment that's on board the International Space Station. One of our Cronus flight controllers, who manages cameras and communications with the space station, Chris White, recently gave a good explainer on Twitter as to why we are seeing just the views here and not the views from space. Now, that live video comes down thanks to our KU band, which is a high data rate communications from space to ground. The antenna that provides that is points to one of the TDRS, or tracking and data relay satellites, which then relays the signal back to the ground. That antenna happens to be located on the top part of the section, top part of the station, where it can most effectively point at the different TDRS satellites, which orbit about a little bit more than 22,000 miles above the Earth. To give you some perspective, the International Space Station is currently orbiting at roughly 250 miles. Now, those satellites provide communication to multiple spacecraft and satellites, including familiar ones like the Space Station Dragon, Hubble Space Telescope. Now, for today's operation, the TDRS we're in range of would be behind the Dragon during his approach. So that means any signal that the antenna would send would reflect off of Dragon, which could potentially damage the antenna's tracking sensors. So to prevent this, the Cronus flight controller here in Mission Control Houston activates what's called a mask, which basically prevents the antenna from pointing at a specific area of the sky. Any spacecraft that approaches zenith or the space-facing side port of Harmony, which is part of the maneuver today, has a large area off limits to the antenna for the antenna to point. And if the antenna can't point at the closest TDRS satellite, then we can't send the video signal. Here's a view from a cargo Dragon undocking. From this position, you can see the cargo Dragon there on the left. That dish that you see there on the right is a space-to-ground antenna. That's the one that points to the tracking and data relay satellites. You see it's pointing in the general vicinity of the Crew Dragon. So that's part of the reason why we're not seeing a lot of live views today. We may be able to see some live views as Dragon makes its final approach from the 20-meter hold point at Waypoint 2 down to the docking axis, but otherwise we're going to play it safe and mask off the area as Dragon makes its position right in between the dish there that you see on the right, the space-to-ground antenna, and the tracking and data relay satellites in geosynchronous orbit more than 22,000 miles from Earth.
For those just joining, Crew Dragon has undocked from the International Space Station and is currently making its way to the midpoint in this relocation maneuver. It will stop and hold once it's 60 meters directly above the Node 2 zenith port and prepare for final approach. Flight controllers in Hawthorne will once again command Dragon to begin its approach, flying in until it reaches Waypoint 2, which is just 20 meters away from station. Once it's there, Crew Dragon will hold one final time for teams on the ground and the astronauts aboard Dragon to do a final check before docking. There aren't any strict requirements to complete docking during a day or night pass, but there's always the chance that This could hold, this hold could continue until lighting conditions on the docking port are ideal. Once ready, Dragon will begin its final approach back to the space station. And we're just about 1 minute until Dragon reaches that midpoint.
Throughout this maneuver to the new docking access, this transition path, the Dragon itself has been holding roughly 60 meters away from the station as it transitions from one docking port to the other. As we near the midpoint, that'll be the halfway point until we reach the new docking access. In the meantime, as we make this transition, please send in some questions using the hashtag AskNASA. We'll do our best to answer them here as we continue to cover the port relocation maneuver and Crew-2 making their way to the new docking access.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop. Midpoint has been reached.
Never comes.
And you heard that confirmation, the Crew Dragon Endeavour making a successful maneuver from the original docking axis after undocking on time, 5:45 a.m. Central Time, moving out to about 95 meters, then back to 60 meters, initiating the transition maneuver and holding at 60 meters from the original docking axis to the midpoint. Now it's now it's making a transition from that midpoint to the new docking axis. It'll take just about another 9 minutes. In the meantime, we'll cover the crew that's currently on board Crew Dragon Endeavour. First is Dragon Commander Shane Kimbrough. It is his third trip to space. He was born in Killeen, Texas, and raised in Atlanta, and was selected as an astronaut in 2004. Kimbrough is a retired U.S. Army colonel and holds degrees in aerospace engineering and operations research. He first launched aboard the Space Shuttle Endeavour on STS-126, then aboard a Russian Soyuz spacecraft for Expedition 49 and 50. Kimbrough is the spacecraft commander for the Crew-2 flight and is a flight engineer for Expeditions 65 and 66 on station. In addition to the usual complement of science and maintenance work for our astronauts, he completed 3 spacewalks earlier this summer with Thomas Pesquet to install the first in a series of new solar arrays on the station, bringing his total spacewalk count to 9.
This mission marks pilot Megan MacArthur's second trip to space, but her first one to the space station. She was born in Honolulu, but considers California her home state. NASA selected MacArthur as an astronaut in 2000. She holds degrees in aerospace engineering and oceanography. MacArthur served as mission specialist aboard Space Shuttle Atlantis on STS-125, the final servicing mission of the Hubble Space Telescope in 2009. She operated the shuttle's robotic arm over the course of 12 days and 21 hours, capturing the telescope and maneuvering crew members throughout the 5 spacewalks to upgrade Hubble's science instruments, along with removal and replacement of other components to lengthen the telescope's life. MacArthur is Crew Dragon Endeavour's pilot for the Crew-2 mission and is serving as a flight engineer conducting science and maintenance for Expeditions 65 and 66 aboard the station.
Mission specialist Aki Hoshide is currently on his 3rd trip to space. Born in Tokyo, Hoshide was selected as an astronaut in 1999 by the National Space Development Agency of Japan, known today as Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, or JAXA. Hoshide earned degrees in aerospace engineering and mechanical engineering. He flew on STS-124 aboard the Space Shuttle Discovery to deliver and install Japan's science laboratory Kibo. He also flew aboard the Russian Soyuz on Expeditions 32 and 33 for a 124-day visit to the International Space Station. In 2014, he also served as commander of the 18th NASA Extreme Environment Mission Operation, an underwater expedition at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's Aquarius habitat off of Florida's Key Largo coast. He now serves as the commander for the International Space Station for Expedition 65 and is a mission specialist for the Crew-2 flight.
Crew-2 is mission specialist Thomas Pesquet's second trip to space. Born in Rouen, France, Pesquet was selected by ESA as an astronaut in 2009. He has a degree in spacecraft design and control and more than 2,300 flight hours as a commercial airline pilot. Pesquet first flew to space on the Soyuz as a flight engineer for Expeditions 50 and 51. In that time, he worked on more than 50 experiments and performed 2 spacewalks to maintain the space station. He has logged 197 days in space. Pesquet is the first European to fly in a Crew Dragon and the first European to launch from America in more than a decade. He's currently a flight engineer for Expedition 65 and will take over the role of station commander later this fall before returning to Earth with the rest of the Crew-2 astronauts.
Now, we will be getting some periodic views from the International Space Station during today's port relocation maneuver. The Dragon itself has maneuvered from the original docking access and past the midway point. We're now in the final stretch of the transition from the midway point, which is the halfway marker between the original docking access and the new one. And Dragon, you see now, is making its way to the new docking access on the space-facing side, really pointing right out towards to space. That's where the International Docking Adapter 3 is located. We're in the final stretch, and now starting to get some views from the International Space Station of Crew Dragon Endeavour in the final stretch of this transition from the midway point to the new docking axis. In the final moments here, we're getting some questions using the hashtag AskNASA. Please keep sending them in as we continue our coverage of Crew Dragon's maneuver to a new port. This first question comes in asking about the views that we're seeing. How come people in Space Station Mission Control Room are able to maintain live views of the International Space Station, but we can't? The answer is that the folks that you're seeing here in Mission Control Houston are looking at the same views that we are. So now we are getting the views from the outside of the International Space Station using some of the external cameras. You see here's a shot from the back of the room. We're now getting these views. Now, the space-to-ground communications, the reason we're able to get these views is due to a communications antenna that's located on the outside of the International Space Station, pointing towards the tracking and data relay satellites. Now, for a large portion of today's maneuver, some of those shots are going to be masked. The communication path between the station, which is 250 miles, and the geosynchronous tracking and data relay satellites, which are more than 22,000 miles from Earth. We mask off those areas to prevent any damage to the communication antennas as they're sending high data rate radio frequency signals, where Dragon really is in between that communication path. So we wouldn't want the high data rate communication signals to bounce off of the Dragon back to the antenna and possibly affect some of the auto-track sensors that are on the outside of the station. So the views that you're seeing are going to be periodic. We may lose them as we make our way to the new docking axis. But right now we're in the home stretch getting some good views. The Cronus, the mission controller here in Mission Control Houston, is overexposing the image of the Dragon. You see it sort of very brightly coming into our view now. When the Cronus overexposes the image and increases the aperture of the station's cameras, you can start to see some of the Draco engines firing the different plumes. You'll see that coming out of Dragon as it makes its transition relocation. That helps to stabilize the Dragon as it makes its way from one docking axis to the other. You can see them overexposing now.
If you look carefully at your screen, you can see the Crew Dragon capsule there firing its some actuation thrusters there to align for this autonomous procedure.
Dragon, SpaceX on the big loop. Dragon has arrived at the 60-meter hold point on zenith, and Dragon is configured for docking. Confirm crew readiness for approach 1.
Endeavor copies all. Crew is ready for approach 1.
Getting more live views from the International Space Station Flight Control Room. You heard confirmation that Dragon has arrived at its new docking axis, holding at 60 meters steady. The Approach 1 maneuver will be executed here shortly, and will move Dragon in from the 60-meter hold point down to Waypoint 2, a 20-meter hold point. From there, it'll hold once again, and teams in both Mission Control Houston and in Hawthorne will conduct a go-no-go readiness poll and make sure that we are good to proceed from Waypoint 2 down to docking with the new port.
And Dragon SpaceX on the big loop. Ground is now go to continue approach, and we will be commanding the resume to approach to Waypoint 2.
Endeavor copies. We are ready for the resume.
And Station Houston on the big loop. Approach is resuming to Waypoint 2. Monitor per step 2 and 1.104. Crew Dragon approach and retreat monitoring.
Good work. Thanks.
As we mentioned before, the port relocation maneuvers are completely autonomous when it comes to the Dragon spacecraft. Although all 4 crew members are suited up and strapped into their seats within the Crew Dragon capsule, they are not commanding the vehicle from inside. All those commands are being sent from ground, and the crew inside the capsule is monitoring, as we heard call out there on the loops.
And we heard that confirmation. Dragon is moving from the 60-meter hold point now at about 46 meters and closing into the 20-meter hold. Again, that Waypoint 2 will be a hold command. Teams will conduct a readiness review, making sure everything is good before proceeding in for a docking. In the meantime, we're getting live views from the International Space Station. We've described the masking that's required as Dragon now is really in between the space-to-ground antenna and the tracking and data relay satellites, so our views of the docking maneuver will be pretty sparse throughout the remainder of today's coverage. We may get a little sneak peek of Dragon actually making contact with the new International Docking Adapter, now 34 meters and closing. In the meantime, keep sending in your questions using the hashtag AskNASA. We'll try to answer as many as we can as we continue our coverage today. This next one is about why we are conducting the maneuver. Why can the Boeing Starliner not dock in place where Endeavour was originally located? So why is this maneuver required? Well, Boeing's CST-100 Starliner's flight software has been certified for docking to the forward port on Harmony for its flight test to the International Space Station. The forward port offers a less complex approach and presents better lighting conditions without the Earth in view of navigation and tracking sensors. Utilizing that forward port on these initial test flights puts the safety of the crew and the two vehicles first.
Waypoint 2.
Starliner will be able to dock to both ports and have the ability to perform port relocation maneuvers by the Starliner 1 mission. This is similar to the approach taken during the first dockings of Crew Dragon during its first test flights to the station.
Hey, Megan, just for your awareness, we are waiting on ground.
Houston Station on the big loop. Procedure review complete, and the ISS crew is ready for docking.
Copy.
And we will be anticipating holding at Waypoint 2 momentarily.
For copies, we will expect to hold at Waypoint 2.
As you're getting live views of the International Space Station Flight Control Room, we have confirmation that the Crew Dragon is holding at Waypoint 2, just 20 meters away from the International Space Station. This is the final hold point before it makes its way from this final hold point, 20 meters away, to contact and capture with its new docking port. As we wait here and the teams assess the go readiness for proceeding in with a docking, we already heard that go from the crew. Keep sending in your questions using the hashtag AskNASA. This next one comes from Alex, who's asking, why does the Crew Dragon crew need to be on board during the dock itself? A good question. Why not just let the Dragon autonomously move from one port to the other? The idea is that in the event of a contingency, if anything were to happen during the port relocation maneuver, say it couldn't undock, or if there was anything that were to happen to the Crew Dragon itself, that the 4 members of the crew have the available seats in the, we'll call it an escape pod, that gets them down to Earth. At all times on board the International Space Station, there needs to be enough seats in the visiting vehicles to provide transportation, a safe transportation from the International Space Station back down to Earth. So if anything were to happen for the Crew Dragon, all 4 would have enough seats to return back to the Earth safely.
So although unfortunately we don't have video of Crew Dragon, all 4 crew members, like we mentioned before, are suited up and buckled into their seats inside the Crew Dragon capsule during this port relocation maneuver. They are now in the final half of this maneuver. We're going to be, the final step will be the final approach, which will take about 4 minutes. We'll hear a call out for CHOP, which stands for Crew Hands Off Point. And this occurs when the spacecraft is about 2 meters away from the docking port and means that any aborts need to be initiated by Dragon's flight computer and after that point rather than by the crew.
And that call will happen at about the 2-meter point. It'll just be a matter of seconds, really, from 2 meters until it makes contact and capture with the International Space Station. That initial capture time will report out as a soft capture. The soft capture ring itself will retract, pulling the Dragon in to begin a hard mating sequence with the International Docking Adapter. That aligns the hooks very nicely, and they'll engage just like we saw at the beginning of today's coverage, all 12 hooks, releasing 6 at a time. We'll see the opposite during the docking sequence. These 12 hooks will engage to hard mate the Crew Dragon to the International Docking Adapter 6 at a time.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop. Ground is go for final approach, and we'll be commanding resume shortly. Please confirm crew readiness for final approach, and visors are down.
Let's go for final approach. Visors are down. Can you confirm the docking light is on?
SpaceX copies. Crew is go. We can confirm that the docking light is on. Additionally, as a reminder, once Dragon is inside the crew hands-off point, retreat and breakout are no longer permitted.
Never copies off.
And Station Houston on the big loop. Monitor per steps 3 and 4 in 1.104 Crew Dragon approach and retreat monitoring.
In work, thanks.
And we're getting views from the external cameras of the International Space Station. You can see the forward end of the Dragon right there, that soft capture ring fully extended. And the sequence for moving in from Waypoint 2 to docking has begun. We're now inside 20 meters from the International Space Station. This sequence, as we move in, will take about 4 minutes until we get a contact and capture of the Dragon, bringing our 4 crew members inside Dragon back inside the International Space Station. Some of the calls you heard during this approach, we of course have Mark Van High inside the International Space Station monitoring the approach. Of course, with the 4 crew members of the Dragon itself inside watching the sequences here. The big loop you're hearing is a communications channel of the space-to-ground communications as well as Dragon-to-ground. So all the communications you're hearing is being heard by the ground teams here in Mission Control Houston as well as Mission Control in Hawthorne, and of course the crew inside Dragon as well as inside the International Space Station. We're now 15 meters in closing.
Love to see this view of the Crew Dragon approaching the space station autonomously, driving itself. If you recall from the previous version of the previous version of Dragon, the cargo capsules, they dock to the station, actually not by docking, but by berthing, which essentially required the robotic Canadarm to grapple the spacecraft and bring it to the station manually. So to see Crew Dragon, this upgraded version, flying on its own without any assistance and able to dock autonomously with the space station is an awesome capability that's just so great to see with our eyes here.
meters.
Copy, 10 meters.
At 10 meters away from this vantage point, you see the Earth there in the lower left corner. We're now flying 262 statute miles over India.
Great shot of the forward.
5 meters.
Great shot of the forward end of Crew Dragon there. Located near the top are the forward Draco thrusters, which of course are not being utilized for today's maneuvers. All the maneuvers are managed with the service section Draco thrusters.
Crew hands off point, 3 meters in closing.
Hands off.
Copy, hands off. Soft capture confirmed.
Copy, soft capture confirmed.
And with that, we have a confirmed contact and soft capture. Dragon and station were flying 262 miles over Western China. That docking time, 6:35 a.m. Central Time, 11:35 GMT.
Soft capture ring retraction in progress.
Never copy.
Upcoming, the teams will command Crew Dragon to begin the hard capture by commanding the hooks. Again, they will operate in 2 sets of 6, so a total of 12 hooks. Will hook in and close, and we'll have confirmation of hard mate complete.
From a live view of the International Space Station Flight Control Room, you can see we're losing some of those live views from the International Space Station, but that mask has been turned off to make sure we protect some of the communications equipment, the space-to-ground antennas, and auto-track sensors aboard the station. So we should be regaining some views shortly. In the meantime, we did have confirmed contact and capture at 6:35 a.m. Central Time, 11:35 GMT. And that was after an on-time undocking from the original docking port at 5:45 a.m. Central Time.
There on your screen, a shot of both the pressurized and unpressurized sections of Crew Dragon. The pressurized section being the conical portion at the top. That's where the crew is currently sitting in their seats. And the bottom half is the trunk, and that's where we place unpressurized cargo, such as the International Docking Adapter upon transportation from Earth to the International Space Station. That's where those were placed for transportation to station, where they were then removed and installed in their now permanent homes. The trunk will be jettisoned whenever it's time for Crew Dragon to return home and allow the heat shield at the bottom of the pressurized section to be exposed and allow the Crew Dragon to splash down safely in the Atlantic Ocean.
Dragon SpaceX ring retraction is complete. Docking sequence is holding for MCS reconfiguration.
Never copy.
With that side view of Crew Dragon, we have a great shot of the service section Draco thrusters that I mentioned earlier. They're the portholes there on the side of Crew Dragon. That is where the thrust comes out from the Draco thrusters, and those are the service section thrusters that we utilized for today's port relocation maneuvering.
Station Endeavour on the big loop. MCS is configured, proceeding with hook driving.
Station copies.
Never copies.
With the soft capture ring retracted before the hard mate sequence can begin, again, there are 12 hooks that are going to secure Crew Dragon Endeavour to the International Docking Adapter. Teams here in Mission Control Houston configured the International Space Station to be on control moment gyro attitude control. Now that it's switched over to control moment gyros, they can begin the hard docking sequence with the driving of the first set of hooks. They're going to drive 6 at a time to make 12 hooks total, securing the Dragon Endeavour to the International Docking Adapter. And with that, we have confirmation that the first set of hooks are driving. As the first set of hooks continue to drive, there are again 2 sets of hooks, 6 each, to hard mate the Crew Dragon Endeavour to the International Space Station. A recap of today's activities. Early this morning, the crew woke up at about 1 o'clock a.m. Central Time, getting ready for their day, eating some food, brushing their teeth, and getting suited up to get ready to go inside Dragon and begin today's port relocation maneuver. After they ingressed the Dragon and closed the hatches both on the Dragon side and International Space Station, NASA astronaut Mark Van High closed the hatch on the station side, the A-Pass hatch, after affixing a docking target. The crew was suited up, performed leak checks in their SpaceX spacesuits, and got ready for an undocking of the original docking ports, where Crew Dragon Endeavour was just about an hour ago. The Crew Dragon Endeavour and the 4 crew members inside, Shane Kimbrough, Megan MacArthur, Thomas Pesquet, and Aki Hoshide, undocked at 5:45 a.m. Central Time about an hour ago and made the transition to the new docking port, making contact and capture with the port that you're seeing here, the Zenith or space-facing port, at 5:35 a.m. Central Time, completing the 50-minute maneuver from the original docking port to its new home, making room on the forward harmony part for the Boeing CST-100 Starliner to dock here in next week. July 30th is when it's set to launch, making contact and capture with the International Space Station set 24 hours later, July 31st.
At this point in time, the first set of hooks have closed and the second set are driving. Again, there are 12 in total and they operate in 2 sets of 6. And we're waiting for confirmation of the closure of the second set of hooks.
Endeavour SpaceX on the big loop. Hard capture is complete. You are go to raise your visors.
Copy, hard capture complete. Visors up.
And with that, we have confirmation that the second set of hooks has finished driving. So all 12 hooks now securing the Crew Dragon Endeavour to the International Space Station. Teams here will now undergo a series of steps to pressurize the vestibule in between the Dragon hatch and the station hatch, just like we saw earlier during today's coverage with the depressurization of the original docking port. We'll see everything in reverse to allow the pressurization to equalize, making sure everything is good before opening up the hatch and letting our 4 crew members inside Dragon back inside the International Space Station. So now that the Crew-2 NASA astronauts Shane Kimbrough and Megan MacArthur, European Space Agency astronaut Thomas Pesquet, and Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency astronaut Aki Hoshide have redocked with the International Space Station, we're going to wrap our live coverage of Dragon's second port relocation maneuver. The crew will take some time now to get out of their suits and begin the process of opening up the hatches in about 2 hours. As mentioned earlier, the relocation has freed up Harmony's forward port for the docking of another commercial spacecraft built to carry humans, Boeing's CST-100 Starliner. This will be Boeing's second test flight of Starliner without crew, as they seek to put the spacecraft through all the phases of a mission before flying people inside of it for the first time. It's set to launch from Florida's Space Coast on July 30th and arrive at the space station about 24 hours later on July 31st. Once Starliner arrives and docks, we'll have another historic first, with 2 commercial spacecraft built to fly humans docked to the space station at the same time.
Meanwhile, Crew-2 will remain on station until this fall. Crew-2 NASA astronauts Shane Kimbrough and Megan MacArthur JAXA astronaut Aki Hoshide and ESA astronaut Thomas Pesquet are targeting early to mid-November for a return to Earth inside Crew Dragon Endeavour off the coast of Florida. But before they go, NASA's SpaceX Crew-2 mission will launch and arrive with NASA astronauts Raja Chari, Tom Marshburn, and Caleb Barron, as well as ESA astronaut Matthias Maurer. So we'll have another full house with 2 Dragon crews docked to the space station at the same time.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop. Docking sequence is complete. Ground will be enabling hardline power and comm connection shortly. You are go to doff your suits per procedure 4.012. We will be changing cameras to external only.
Copy all, docking system complete. We are go to doff suits. Arthur, thanks to you and your team and all the folks in Houston who got us here safely back on the station.
So again, with those words from the crew and from here, Mission Control Houston, and the teams, of course, over at Mission Control Hawthorne, that'll wrap up our coverage for today's port relocation maneuver. Crew Dragon Endeavour now hard-mated to its new docking port on the space-facing side of the International Space Station. That's it for the action for us during this operation, but there's more to come. Later today, we'll provide coverage of the launch of the Russian multipurpose logistics module. That coverage is set to begin at 10:30 a.m. Central Time, so stick with us and we'll provide that launch coverage up until it launches at 10:58 a.m. Central Time. That's not it for this week. We, of course, have another operation coming on Friday. We'll have the undocking of Progress 77, a Russian cargo vehicle. It'll be bringing the Pirs docking compartment with it. We'll set our coverage for 8:45 a.m. Eastern Time on Friday, July 23rd for an undocking at 9:15 a.m. Central Time. Lots of actions to come. Well, thanks again for one more time for tuning in for today's coverage. We'll hope you join us, of course, for the upcoming coverage of some of the Russian operations, and of course for the launch of OFT-2, Orbital Flight Test 2, of the Boeing Starliner later this month, and again this fall for a lot of upcoming operations, including cargo missions. We have the Northrop Grumman 16 mission and the SpaceX CRS-23 cargo mission, and of course our crew operations for Crew-2 and Crew-3 activities in the fall. Until then, so long.
NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory presents the Von Karman Lecture, a series of talks by scientists and engineers who are exploring our planet, our solar system, and all that lies beyond.
Good evening, everybody here on Lab and all of you watching at home. My name is Brian White with JPL's Office of Education and Communication. Welcome to the Von Karman Lecture Series. When I was younger, personally, I was playing Little League Baseball, and as you may know, there's a lot of downtime in baseball. And I would look up at the clouds. I would just watch them glide over, which probably explains why I wasn't very good at Little League Baseball. But what I did do was I would find shapes in them like everyone else around me. What I didn't learn about or know about was what these clouds really did to our climate, how they would affect what would happen down the road, really their effect on what was happening at that moment. What can the attributes of these wondrous feather canyons tell us about the future? And as the great scientist Joni Mitchell once said, we looked at clouds from both sides now, from up and down, and still somehow we really don't know clouds at all. Tonight we'll have 3 speakers followed by a brief discussion and some Q&A. And if you're watching at home, please feel free to ask. We'll make sure you get those questions up. Our social media team will do that. But our first speaker received his PhD at the University of Melbourne, Australia, and literally wrote the textbook when it comes to remote sensing. Professor Stevens has made major research contributions in 3 related areas: atmospheric radiative transfer, remote sensing, and the topic of cloud climate feedbacks. He has a citation count over 27,000. He is a member of the U.S. National Academy of Engineering, fellow of the Royal Society, and the co-chair of the Scientific Steering Group for the Global Energy and Water Exchanges Project of the World Climate Research Program. He is the co-director of the Center for Climate Sciences. Please welcome Dr. Graham Stevens.
Okay, I'm on, yeah. Well, thank you all for coming this evening and to give us an opportunity to talk about one of my favorite topics, clouds. No doubt you've all heard the phrase Earth is a blue planet, right? But something that's a common kind of way of describing Earth. But as we look at Earth from the perspective of the moon, we notice that, of course, Earth is also wrapped in a thin veil of white water. It's not only is it blue water that covers 70% of the Earth's surface in the oceans, but about the same area of the Earth is covered by this thin veil of white. And this combination of this veil of white water in the form of clouds, together with the combination of snow and ice at the Earth's surface, you truly would be forgiven to think of Earth as a white planet just as much as a blue planet. And it's the whiteness of the planet Earth, in many respects, that's really quite important for understanding the role of clouds in climate. And we're going to get into this topic a little bit more in a minute. Okay, so let's think about water on Earth, and you'll be shocked, I think, as to how thin this veil of water is in the sky in the form of clouds, but yet how important it is for life on Earth. Okay, so about 90% of all the water on Earth is in the oceans. It's saline and it's basically contained in the oceans. About 2.5–3% of the water on Earth is fresh, the water that we rely on to sort of support life as we know it. About 1%, roughly 1%-ish of the fresh water is in the atmosphere. So it's 1% of 2% or thereabouts. About 1% of that 1% is the water in these clouds that control and influence climate, as we're going to learn. So it's tiny. Now, the water in the atmosphere is about 1 inch deep. It's barely a puddle. If you wrapped all the water around Earth from the sky, it's about 1 inch deep. And the water in clouds